Hey everybody, welcome back to our Workshop Wednesday. We are continuing with our conversation regarding technical design. And I'm going to give you guys just a little bit of a break from our traditional show and tell. We've been going into our Gerber technology system quite a lot, but today we're going to be talking about inspiration. So I will get a chance to show you a little bit of that in the Gerber system. However, what we're going to do is we're actually going to start with WGSN. WGSN is called, it's Worth Global Style Network, and it's out of the UK. They've got an incredible, they do have an office in New York, but they have built an incredible business globally for trend and style research. So if you were familiar with something called Style Site some time ago, WGSN and Style Site are now like the same thing. So you may have come across Style Site in an earlier life, but not literally. But WGSN is the one of the leaders here, really the primary leader for trend forecasting. There are quite a lot of trend forecasting sites, but this is the one that we are currently using at the Fashion Incubator. And we're looking forward to getting a chance to share with you what that looks like. So today we're talking about what it really looks like to consider inspiration and why you consider inspiration in the tech pack and why you, as a technical designer, get inspired too. So this really helps with communication with our, I'm going to share this with you guys so you can see what I'm looking at. This particularly helps with the inspiration that goes into a tech pack. It helps to kind of describe the attitude and the style of a tech pack of a particular style. And so you really want to be able to use some of these garments that may help to guide the factory into making more of what you're trying to do. A lot of times, if you're just passing details that are only measurements or only, say, a technical sketch, if your technical sketch is not perfectly proportionate, or if there's a measurement that's off in your point of measure, chances are that the sample you're going to get back will reflect exactly what you requested. We typically use a reference image or an inspiration image to help guard against what is typically, something that happens quite a lot, which are errors in the prototyping sample. A miscommunication will happen, or there may be something that doesn't get caught in translation. And so it's really key to have a picture that's typically worth 1,000 words. That cliche is very true in our world because you're typically working with a global network of various people. Even just trying to communicate your ideas to one other person can be a challenge, let alone trying to communicate your ideas to someone else who doesn't speak your language natively as you do. So, and that can happen around the world. So what we want to do is to kind of give the people that we're working with, our team, a reference of what it is that we're trying to go for. So if for some reason they see, a line or a stitch out of place on your sketches, or if the proportions don't look like the reference sample that you're saying, this is what we're going for, this is the reference image, then typically this is an opportunity to be able to ask questions and to verify the request before it becomes an actual sample. Let me just show you a couple of things here. We're going to just look at the women's market, and we'll take a look at some of these. Let's go with something that's more about silhouette. So I think I saw this press reviews for women's clothing. So let's just start with one of them here. Let's see. What I particularly love about WGSN are these very directional photographs, these really beautiful images with the lovely backgrounds, the colors and the graphics. It's very directional in and of itself. But as you're looking at these styles and how it's kind of tied about the shoulder, I may have some trouble communicating a detail like what you see in this collar detail in the actual sketch. Because if I were to draw my technical sketch, it's just going to be very flat. It's going to, the collar will look as if it's, 8 or 9 inches long, but we know that the human neck is not actually quite so long. So the intention of making the collar height as tall as it is, that turtleneck, as tall as it is so that it does that really cool, scrunchy, slouchy detail around the neck. And so the volume that has to be there and the height that has to be there when it's laid flat is what the technical designer is going to share with the factory. But this reference image helps the factory to know, does this actually look that way on the body with the measurements that the technical design team has passed? And so you won't necessarily be able to see that if you only focus on the technical drawing. You will never draw a technical drawing with this slouch in the style because it's not a fixed detail. If you were to lay this like flat across your bed or on a table, for display or before you're about to wear it, you won't see that until you put it on and the natural height of your neck creates that detail. So this is really where the inspiration helps to support the design request so that they know, or they may recommend an amendment to some of the measurements that you may have shared with them. It looks like there's also a detail with the width of the neckline that helps to support what's happening in the collar detail. And so it's key here, this kind of funnel neck. And so it's really key to even be able to know when that rib should start and how far out towards the shoulder it should begin in order to achieve that look. So similarly, it may not be as detailed as, hey, well, whenever I have the garment on, I won't see that detail. It may just be a volume issue. So like if, say this jacket is intended for a woman's body. However, the shape and styling of this jacket is much wider than her shoulders, than her natural shoulder. And the shape of it is much boxier than maybe a jacket that fits like this, right? So there may be some confusion if you're working with a factory that typically does, traditional suiting, and they may say, hey, your proportions don't look correct for a blazer. The shoulder is way too wide, the sleeves are way too loose, the body circumference is too large. This doesn't fit any woman. So that may or may not be true, but if you know what the style is that you're going for, you may send them a reference image here to say, this is what we're going for. It doesn't fit the wearer as a more tailored or more closely fitted piece. This is intended to be much larger. It's intended to sit away from the body. So these are the things that you would utilize in order to communicate these differences in maybe what the factory is used to doing. I can't tell you how important this has been for me personally whenever I've worked with brands that have very different customers. Each brand has a different expectation, aesthetic, and attitude. And so the personality of the person who wears this COS jacket versus the person who wears this French Connection jacket is probably quite different. You can even see it communicated in the appearance of the model. So there's a lot of that kind of gets translated through the imagery that you really couldn't capture in a technical sketch. So even if you do all of your callouts beautifully, I always recommend using a reference image for inspiration. So the other thing that I wanted to do was to go back to, we saw a really cool opportunity to talk about there was one on print. So I want to go back to that to show you guys prints that are trending. Let's see if I can find it again. Let's put it into our chat, into our search here. So when we look at prints, so one of the things that we like to do is to also, especially if we have something unique, let's say there's a unique placement of a print, something of this nature that would be very difficult to explain in just a technical sketch. But for it's a guiding post for the factory when they're making it to know when they've got it correct. So if this is the inspiration and say we're patchworking a lot of different colors and textures and prints, so they're not going to be matching up lines, they're not going to be matching up colors necessarily. This is actually quite tricky if you don't know what the end goal is supposed to be. And so you're telling them to not pay attention to what they would typically do, but to follow the reference. And so this is going to take a little bit more thinking to put together because the patches have to go together in a certain way. This one may be more about the scale of the print and how it may appear on the body. And so imagine if for this particular style, you have this cat-like detail on a size medium, but then you also scale this size up to a size, extra large. The size of this cat has to also grow with the actual garment. And so therefore all of the print has to grow with the garment because it will start to look different for each style if you don't make an adjustment. And so imagine how your customer who's a size 8 would feel versus a size 14 and vice versa. Like, you want to make sure that everyone is getting the same experience, a very inclusive experience with the product. And so the way that we do that is to make them all look the same regardless of the size that it's being cut into, which means that the print has to grow and shrink with the sizes that go into the style. So this is where we actually have to grade or size the print or pattern. I just love these. These are really fun to look at. It's something really different for your eye to consider, like, oh, would I put in prints that way? Would I try some different ideas? Like, how would I use a scarf print? So I really appreciate these. I also love these for the scale. Also, some of these details here. This is really unique. One of the things that technical designers are constantly having to do is to look at how different details are getting translated. And in an inspiration piece like this, to be able to actually see what the intention is so key, because otherwise there's no way to get something like this right if you haven't shared a reference, or maybe it's even something that you've done at home. I've actually used inspiration from things that I have draped on my dress form, and then I send it to the factory and say, this is the inspiration. This is, what it was created. I may take pictures of what it looked like on the dress form before I actually finish the tech pack and send it off to the factory. So even if it's not a completely finished garment, having the inspiration for the fit, for the drape, for what the intention was for a particular detail, all of those things coming across now become exceptionally helpful for the factory to be able to get to the right endpoint. So inspiration is key, and technical designers get inspired too. So there's a lot of ways to help make sure that the garment comes back correctly. That is the principal job of the technical designer. So whether you are a designer yourself and you're fulfilling this role, or whether you are solely a technical designer, going from the concept all the way to a finished product that can be sold is really where we're going. And so this inspiration page is really what helps us to do that, whether it's the print, whether it's the color that we talked about the last time, or whether it's an aesthetic that we're going for. All of these things help to correct for anything that may have been missed in the communication of the style. And so it really becomes your bottom line, almost a gold standard in terms of supporting the creation of the product. So we'd love to get a chance to share with you guys more about what that means and what that could look like for you. But we know that we have a really great opportunity to add to that understanding, regardless of where we're working, regardless of the factory that we've employed to support our work to be able to use something like this to be able to communicate clearly. So clear communication is the goal. So we look forward to getting a chance to continue this conversation with you. And we hope that you enjoyed today's session. Thanks so much.